So again, thank you all for joining today. Happy that you're here. And it looks like the chat is enabled with, let's see, co-host and host. So that might be the reason why you can't chat with each other. That is okay for right now. Let's see. There we go. Chat's turned on for everybody. Now, please introduce yourself with everyone. Thanks for calling that out. So I'm excited that you're here to talk about the mindset and strategies at the core of executive presence. Chat box should be activated, by the way. Feel free to chime in there. My name is Dr. Benjamin Ritter. I am the founder of Live for Yourself Consulting. I work with leaders to be the leader of their own career. So if you feel stuck, if you're wondering what to do next, if you aren't really sure how to tell your professional story and not sure how to turn that into meaningful work, then this is one way to take a step forward. Another way is to send me a message and let's just have a conversation. Let's see what's going on. But I'm happy that you're here because really exploring what executive presence is for you and for your organization is a great way to make progress in your career and ultimately unlock your professional superpowers. And executive presence is not just you knowing what they are, but other people knowing what they are too. We have some pretty incredible panelists with us today. So we have Shelly Taylor, who is the CEO of Alamo Draft House, and she joined Alamo in May 2020. So think about what was happening in the world in May 2020. And at this point in time, Alamo Draft House is outperforming the industry by 12% and in growth mode and adding 6 new franchises and 5 corporate locations. If you've been to Alamo Draft House, I'd love for you to throw it in the chat. Say something about Alamo. I actually just moved out to Windsor Park and there's an Alamo really close. And so I know where I'm going to be spending some of my evenings and days. We also have with us today Scott Jensen, who is the CEO of Rhythm Superfoods, an Austin-based manufacturer of organic plant-based superfood snacks. I have a passion for better for you CPG products. And let me tell you, I used to have an expense account at the company I used to be a part of, and I would go to Whole Foods and stock up on snacks for when I did some trips out there. Not to mention the fact that I always have them in my cupboard here. So he also co-founded CB Stubblefield, and a few close friends subsequently sold to McCormick & Co. in 2015. He also co-founded Stubbs Austin Restaurant Company, the famous barbecue and live music venue in Austin. Some pretty iconic Austin, executives here today. So if either of those brands resonate with you, if any of them do, throw it in the chat. Let's hear from you. We also have Carrie Siggins, who is the CEO of Stone Age Inc., a fast-growing manufacturing and technology company based in Colorado. Represent Colorado, Carrie. We got some Austin here, but we also have some Colorado. I'm going to be going out there in June. Maybe you can find some time to say hi. So her leadership has led Stone Age to experience double-digit growth year over year. I mean, there's so much more to say about these executives, but I want to hear from them. I want to hear what they have to say. So let's move into our topic today, which is executive presence. So Carrie, can you start us off and share what executive presence really means to you?
Yes, I think it is your ability to influence and inspire and to have, I think, respected executive presence. It has to be authentic. And so you have to figure out what that means for you. I think we'll all share our experiences, but that's coming from our own lens based on our experiences, our personality styles, and how we show up day to day. But everybody in the world wants to be able to influence, right? They want people to listen to their ideas, for people to consider them as serious, to be taken seriously. And you do that through executive presence. And so for me, it's about finding your unique way to inspire people and to influence people to be able to drive towards the outcomes that you desire.
I love that authenticity piece and how it it resonates with me specifically because I believe that executive presence is unique. Like there
Yeah.
might be some foundational pillars to it, but ultimately, what does it mean for you? And how do you need to be an executive? How do you need to be present to progress in whatever you're trying to make progress in? And Scott, I saw you unmute, so I'd love for you to chime in.
Yeah, I just loved what Carrie said, and I would add that there's a cliche term of servant leader that gets thrown out a lot, and we're just no longer in like the mid 20th century's way of running companies and being a leader. You have to inspire the teams around you. You can't get anything done. It's not a top down, push down, I make the rules, you follow them world anymore. So, some folks, learn that early on, and they can move up the leadership ladder faster by understanding what that means, and having, believability and transparency as part of, your DNA means that the people trust you, and the trust means that they're going to gather around the initiatives that you're pioneering, and that helps the organization move forward. So just thought I'd add that.
Yeah, I really like that. I'll just add one more thing to it. I'm actually going through some difficult conversations with a woman who's on my executive team, and executive presence is exactly what she's missing. She is brilliant. So incredibly smart. But when you don't have the ability to collaborate and to convey your ideas and communicate well, and present yourself with authenticity and authority, it's hard to develop executive presence. And so I've been talking to her about this, and it's really something that she's having a hard time wrapping her head around, because she's trying to go from like this logical perspective. Yeah, but I do X, Y, Z, right? But being smart is not what executive presence is. And so I think that's a really important thing to understand. It really truly is how people experience you, how you make them feel when they interact with you. And so I think that's a really important aspect, just to build on what Scott said there.
It's so critical how you make people feel. Executive presence. How do people feel around you, and how do you want them to feel? So if we were to actually build off of that question, how do you want people to feel as a leader? What is it that you need them to think, right? Or to do, or to perceive about you in an organization? And Shelly, I'd love for you to chime in.
I think like executive presence is like a thumbprint, and it is unique. And I think authenticity is important. And when you can show up as your authentic self, and you're grounded in your own core values, and you're grounded in the core values of that organization, you can be who you are, and then create that safe space for the other person to be who they are, right? Because that truly is like when companies are working well, or teams are working well, or you with your guest or customer is working well, is when both parties are very comfortable in what's the objectives and how do we move forward by creating that safe space. But it really starts with you, and are you comfortable with who you are and your own core values and how they match? If that's not a match, then the rest just doesn't happen. So it has to start there.
I'm hearing some hints towards how to develop executive presence. And Carrie, it sounds like you're at this point in time working with someone specifically on figuring this out, because this person's brilliant, but they're not exuding something. There's some magic sparkle missing. And I know it's not that ambiguous. Like there are actually actions or things that you want some people to feel. And the authenticity, again, has been brought up a couple of times. So I'd love for you to share a couple of things that you're working on with this individual, if you can. And then I'd love to hear from the rest of the panelists too.
Yeah. So I think it absolutely goes what Shelley said, right? It is unique to each of us, and it has to be in alignment with your core values. And also, which means you have to understand yourself. And so that is where the start of all of this is developing self-awareness and really getting to know who you are, what strengths you have, and how the very best parts of your personality can show up and what triggers you. And that is how you inform executive presence. And in this particular instance, and everything is unique, this person has a victim mentality. Things happen to her. And I'm of the belief that, we're responsible for everything that happens in our life. And when we do that, we take agency over our lives and we can make the changes that we want. And so that's one thing that I'm really working on with her is this, and I don't know if I can get her there, right? Because teaching somebody that deep feeling of responsibility for how you show up, how you make people feel, that people aren't responsible for your triggers, is something it's a really interesting conversation. And it's a really personal one. And so, that's where I'm working really intensely, is this whole idea of, how do I get people into this place of self-empowerment rather than I'm a victim? And there's no way that she'll be able to develop that sort of executive presence coming from a place of victimhood. So I think that's a really key thing, is responsibility. Do you take responsibility for everything in your life? Do you take responsibility for how you make people feel, how you show up, for your attitude, for your actions, for your effort, for your performance? And when you do that, you will more naturally be able to, I think, develop executive presence. But if you think things happen to you, if you blame other people or blame situations or blame time or, whatever, then it's really hard, I think, to dive into that space where you really do inspire, confidence and have the ability to influence people.
I would offer one thing also, from my own personal experience. I've always felt very comfortable as a leader, and a couple of things just recently in the last few years. One is just the advent of people working from home and having to transition on how I meet with people. I'm not as good a leader online. I don't think I'm as effective, on the various softwares and apps that help you keep, a better communication platform with the teams that you have. And so COVID, sent a lot of people home and we had to adjust, but I'm still not as good as I am in person. And that's just something that I'll continue to have to learn. But a big part of our organization is down in Mexico, Guadalajara. It's the heartland of vegetable and fruit growing. And that's what we make as organic and natural snacks. And I thought I knew how to be a leader worldwide until the cultural divides of what it is to be in Mexico and working at a manufacturing plant and leading people in that way. And there's, several hundred people that work for us down there versus the smaller team of sales and marketing and finance up here in the US. I thought because I traveled so extensively in Mexico as a tourist, I could understand the culture, and it is like night and day running a business and running a team and leading a team. So I'm 50% of the leader down there than I am up here, learning every day how to be better at it. But a cultural country geography change, if you have business in another country, is something that becomes a vertical learning curve early on. And it's very exciting to be a part of it, because no matter what age you are, you want to keep learning. So it's exciting, but it also kind of set me back a little bit, I'm not as good down there as I am up here.
Yeah, I think the journey to learn executive presence is a two-way street. I think that you as an individual, I agree, need to take agency and accountability. And it's, we all show up differently. Some people are super funny and some people are more serious, but it doesn't mean you can't create energy and safety and collaboration. I think the other thing is the company's responsibility. And I know for Carrie and Scott, based on their success and what I've gotten to know about them, they do this well. It's how do you create your internal kind of norms, cultural norms, so that people understand how you interact with each other within that company. And I think that, if you're trying to develop your executive presence, like maybe and you're struggling, maybe the first thing is to re-embed yourself into the company norms and figure that out. And through that, that's a journey that you can start to say, okay, like, here's how we act at this company. How do I then show up in a way that works for me and makes me feel good? Because I think sometimes we forget, if we're having fun, whatever that means, and fun is different to different people, we'll give that back to others, and we'll create that loop of energy. And I think that's one way to approach it if you're trying to develop that skill.
There's again this beautiful through line between the how you make people feel piece. It's instead of I feel like I'm the victim, instead you're turning that lens to, well, what might this person think? Scott, with your comment about cultural differences, your question was how do they feel? How am I leading for them? This aspect, Shelley, where you brought up embedding yourself into the company, it's how do I fit in and add value? Like there's this aspect, I think, that some people don't always grasp when it comes to executive presence. It's not how do I seem more powerful? It's how do I do more for the company? How do I create maybe greater trust, better connections, more of an impact? And how do I communicate that in a clear way so that people understand that, even people from different backgrounds? I see, Scott, did you have something to add?
I was just going to say that is interesting. That what you just added was when you get to another country where the language barrier is so deep, it's really hard to see the social cues of whether or not you're being a leader with effectiveness or not, and whether you're there present and have presence with the team, because most of the leadership team down there does speak English, but there's just a whole different dynamic down there where you're not getting the feedback circle that you get in your own home country, home language. That's kind of so important for you as a leader to hear the feedback. And so I find it like triply difficult. And I am becoming a better leader down there, but it's definitely through engagement that is more open in a different way down there than it is up here.
And Scott, you've kind of hinted at one of your struggles. And so I'm going to pick on Carrie because she's unmuted. So can you also share some of your greatest struggles as a leader?
Sure. Yes. Oh God, there's so many. Do we have hours? And they're all, self-inflicted wounds, usually. So I move very quickly. I consider myself to be a disruptive leader. I'm definitely disrupting our industry in many different aspects. And that can make some people feel left behind. Especially if I'm, 10 steps ahead of somebody and they don't understand, okay, well, where is she going here? And so a lot of my self-inflicted wounds have been because I moved too quickly, and I haven't brought people along for the journey so they understand where I'm going. So that's something that I've been working on for the last decade, and I've made a lot of progress with it. But yeah, that is something that I have to always watch. That I love new ideas. I'm an ideator, and it's really easy for me to go, you know what, that's a good idea. And I see how it connects the dots, but not everybody else does. And to everybody else, it just feels like more work. So that's one of my biggest ones. And then the other one, the things that really keep me up at night. I mean, I think the number one job of a leader is to develop people, right? Your job as a leader is to inspire people to do their very best work and to live their very best life. And if you put, other things in front of that, then you are not building the team that's going to, build more success for you, for other people, for the company, all of those things. So I take the conversations that I have very seriously with people. So for example, this young woman that I'm working with, it's hard to have those difficult conversations. And I try to be what I call tough-minded, but kind-hearted. And I oscillate between, maybe being too like, okay, this isn't working, we have to fix it now, to maybe giving people too many chances, or maybe wanting it more than what they want, right? My husband told me that, like, just because you want it for her doesn't mean that she's actually going to do it. And you would think after doing this for 15 years, like I would have that drilled into me, but I still like believe in potential. And potential is only part of it, right? You have to take action and do it. And so the things that keep me up at night are typically going to be those challenging conversations that I want to get right. I want to be compassionate, but clear and direct. I want people to understand exactly where they stand, and then do it in a way that, even if they have to exit the company, that they feel like they are a valued human being. And so I work really hard to have those types of productive, helpful, kind conversations, even if they're difficult. And so that's just something that, we're always having crucial conversations as leaders. And so it's something I take very seriously. And yeah, it can cause angst as I put that pressure on myself to try to get it right every time, which is, 50-50.
There's something that I've noticed about working with executive leaders over the past couple of years, is that many of them worry about getting it right. And it's this constant concern and care for the people that you're leading, or even just the people around you in general. And now there are leaders that don't have that. But to Scott's point earlier about what leadership is today and what you can get away with, it's different. And that level of care or attention on your people is what's required for people to follow you. At most, I'd say a majority of organizations in the United States. I'm not speaking globally. It might also be globally. But Shelley, did you have something to share around maybe a leadership struggle that you've experienced or are experiencing?
Yeah, first of all, as leaders, we all struggle and we all share that. So there's no one without that. And I think that's important for people to remember. Probably the biggest struggle that I face is we have 40 locations across the United States, and a large workforce that we never get to meet face to face. You might be in you will meet a fraction of the people, even if we're out in the venues all the time. And it is very easy to have incredible intent and make decisions and roll out programs or whatever and have them go wrong. And so for us, it's a constant journey to make sure that we're checking our egos at the door and that we are open and listening to the feedback. And sometimes, maybe sometimes the feedback isn't going to be acted on. But frequently, if you're willing to face it and acknowledge that you're doing your best, but your best is never going to hit the mark all the time, and listen and take that feedback and then action against it, and also be open, to letting your teams tell you the solution. I think most of us are successful because we like to solve problems. But sometimes we just got to get out of the way and let others. And so that's usually my biggest struggle, is I want to be the one with the answer and solve the problem. And it's usually not the right decision. So, we're just in constant feedback loop with our teammates and making sure that we're letting them lead and that we're supporting as appropriate. And that will always be my biggest struggle. It's also the joy of the job, because when you get it right, man, it's fun.
I've heard a couple times that leadership has changed and it's difficult in the remote world. And so I just love to broaden this and say, okay, post 2020, you're an executive, you've been an executive through this. What do leaders need to know today? Someone saying, I'm about to enter into this leadership role, or I'm struggling as a leader, it's not the same. What's a tip or even just an idea that you can share with everybody?
There's a couple of things that still ring true. And I think listening, and I'm talking about like not necessarily like a seasoned leader, but I just remember the first job I ever had, I was 6 months into a big ad agency, and there was a big client review. And I should have known early on that it wasn't my place to like be offering suggestions. You know, there's very seasoned people there, as you know, $50 million, $100 million a year account. And I was offering up solutions, you know, when they were questioning what the media plan was, like, oh, we'll have that to you by Monday, no problem. And like, I looked at my team and they were just flames coming out of their ears. I knew the look, like I had way overstepped. And I learned, that was one of the first learning episodes of listening. Instead of thinking that you have something to offer immediately, it's like, you know, intellectual curiosity is still here as of 2020. You have to be intellectually curious. Like, you're not going to become a leader of a company like, you know, like the companies that we're leading, if you're not every day trying to figure something new out and network with people that may know more about you. If you're listening to podcasts, you're just intellectually curious, not because you have this objective of being this great leader. It just satisfies you to be that way. So listening allows you space and time to learn to be a better leader. And then you have to be able to turn that into leading for something. I mean, the last thing you want to be is the crazy person that led people down the wrong path. So to some extent, the history of where we are today and what we saw once 2020 and 2021 came around, and you saw, you know, supply chain disruption. I mean, probably for Shelley, you guys had to close every unit that existed. We had to close Stubbs Barbecue. You couldn't be open. So that was like the biggest epic shock we could have ever. I didn't know what to do. We were trying to figure out how to deliver barbecue from our restaurant. I don't know what you do at Alamo to deliver a movie, but probably movie nights that you would have to then get rights to be able to show. So we've all been challenged in a very incredible way over the last couple of years. And I think it's changed the way the US and the world will do business from here on out.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think some things will never go out of style. Kindness, listening, care for humans, care for your business, your product, like that just won't change. But I think we've all learned how, not everyone, but many businesses learned how to live through a prolonged state of threat. And I think when you're in a threat state, you learn a lot about yourself. You learn a lot about your organization, your team. And I think as you move forward, there's things to learn from that. But I think it's also important to let it go. Because I still encounter people who are living in that state of threat and haven't let go of the fear. And business and humans, we're not meant to be living that way. So I think as we move into this next chapter, we have to get back to a state of calm and belief and strength and optimism. And then, you know, I think it also opened our eyes that we can still be true to our core and our brands and who and what we are, but we can change. And that change can actually like lead to things that you never expected. You know, one of the things that we're doing is we're reinventing how you order at Alamo, and that will be rolled out in the very near future. And that probably would not have been on our roadmap prior to COVID, but it's allowed us to imagine the world differently. And I think will actually provide a better Alamo experience in the long run. So I think it's, you know, knowing what to stay true to that doesn't go out of style. It's using that long period of time to learn from, let it go. And then, you know, be open because, man, we're evolving and it's cool. And there's so much opportunity now.
Yeah, and I would add, I love all of that. I think that's all of it's spot on. I think the number one leadership trait people need to have going into, you know, into this, whatever the world's going to look like here soon, is adaptability. We have got to be able to adapt what's thrown at us. And that is what I think COVID taught us is we've got to be able to pivot on a dime, and the people who can handle change well are going to be the ones who are more successful. And if you don't handle change well, that's okay. But it is something that you need to be aware of. And how do I work on that? But because we're going to have to, we don't know when the next, you know, black swan or gray rhino, I think they call it, is going to hit. And so, but we do know that we're going to have to be dealing with things that are thrown at us as leaders, whether it's something that's out of our control or whether it's something that's within our control. So I would just add that one last piece of this is adaptability. And if you do struggle with change, now is the time to be working on understanding where that fear comes from, because usually a resistance to change is coming from a place of fear. And from a place of burnout. I think, the whole letting things go, it's tough. Like a lot of people are experiencing burnout. A lot of leaders are experiencing burnout. And that's okay. There's a lot of reasons why we shouldn't be ashamed about it. We need to get the help that we need, because we're going to have to be able to be adaptable and continuously change. And that is exhausting for people. But that is the new norm.
The importance of adaptability. I was working with a client this morning, and we were discussing a switch from being defensive about why something wouldn't work to kind of that yes and mentality. So yes, we're going to do this change. What stage are we in this change? Are we ideating? Are we brainstorming? Or have we made the commitment? Do I need to be positive? Do I need to be solution oriented? Do I need to point out consequences, but then work towards solutions and to avoid those consequences? How do I become part of the team? And I was just curious because you brought up and by the way, I think that also includes the intellectually curious component, which is instead of fighting against something, I'm going to become curious and lean into it. But I was very interested in the rates of anxiety and stress right now. Oh, Shelley, you mentioned this prolonged state of threat. And so I just looked up real quick. And 2023, 67% of employees stated that they were stressed. 54% stated that they were anxious due to their jobs. And these numbers are up from about 36% anxious and 55% stressed. So you've seen a pretty big jump. And this is so crucial when you're leading in an organization, to understand that everyone around you almost is in this constant state of fear. And so then how are you leading as a leader in those moments? And how do you potentially have to adapt your style based on the fact that what you feel, a lot of other people probably feel, and maybe even at a heightened amount?
Those are some unbelievable statistics, by the way. It brings something to the surface that, although as a leader, I know that's happening around me. I have so much confidence when financially things are going really well in my company. And I think many leaders do. And it's hard to keep that optimism up for the rest of your team when you're getting kicked in the stomach by COVID events or whatever event it is, not just all COVID. You could have supply chain issues that happen that are just like sunflower seeds. We use a lot of them. There's a war in Ukraine. It's the largest growing area of sunflower seeds in the world. So my sunflower seeds doubled in price, and that was a big major deal. But from a leadership standpoint, like, although I still have the confidence and I have that optimism, you have to have the optimism. No one wants to follow someone that's prepared to let doom and gloom take over. But I think, recognizing, like, I didn't realize the shift so dramatically in terms of people feeling so stressed. I knew we all were, but that's like double what it was a few years ago. So awareness of things like that, and maybe even interacting more in establishing some availability for people to be able to talk through those anxiety that they're feeling. Probably done less than a great job on that myself, just hearing that statistic.
Yeah, I think the number one thing is you've got to talk about it. And that's hard, right? Because I literally have just been going through this because I've been experiencing burnout myself. I love the AI question because I was in Bali on a girls' trip and I called my husband. I was like, I cannot relax. I am so worried about what AI is going to do to society. And I'm dealing with all this stuff and I'm burnt out. And he's like, why are you on vacation reading the news? And I felt like I couldn't talk about it because I don't want to, I don't want to open that Pandora's box, right? Once I let it out, I'm like going like, I'm just not motivated to solve these problems right now because I'm feeling burnt out. What is that going to do to my team? How are they going to feel? Like if their leader is burnt out, then is everybody just going to be like, yeah, me too. And it was just the story I was telling myself in my head. And I finally talked to my VP of sales and he was talking about some things that he was dealing with. And I was like, Mike, I got to tell you, I'm feeling the same exact way. And we spent an hour and a half. It was like 10 o'clock in Bali and, whatever time, 6 a.m. in the United States. And we had this really great conversation. And I felt so much better after talking about it. And I literally was like, okay, I'm coming back and I'm going to lean into these difficult conversations that I know I need to have that are weighing on me, that are causing part of this. And it was like, ding, 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 ding. Like, people just need to talk. And it doesn't mean that you're going to solve their problems, right? There are real challenges, both in work and outside of work, plus just all the negativity that's going on around us, whether, you pay attention to the news or not. Like, it's in the air, it's in our energy fields. But it was a really good reminder for me that everybody just needs to talk. And we need to teach people how to listen and ask people, how are you doing? Because literally when somebody cares and you can just express it, it releases a little bit of that pressure valve. And so I think we have to be willing as leaders to talk about the hard stuff. And even when we're feeling burnt out ourselves, share that, and then create that safe space for your team to be able to talk about it. Because it is the first step in being able to take action to dealing with the things that are causing us stress, is to be able to verbalize it, because then we can put together a plan to take action. So I think that's a really important aspect is you got to be willing to lean into those conversations, and you've got to be willing to be a little bit vulnerable and have them yourself.
Shelley, do you have something to add? I see you're off mute.
I think that was well put. And I know there's
Okay,
probably
wonderful.
questions. So
Yeah, so if you have questions, throw them in the chat, please. We're in the Q&A portion. I want to for a moment, a little bit more about that stress piece, because when people are stressed, there's a couple negative repercussions. They can get burnt out. They could quit. They could be disengaged. But I think also, right, there's one of the most important things that often gets overlooked. Creativity and innovation get stifled. People it's almost impossible to use that part of our brain when we're stressed. And the ability to talk about your stress in a work environment, even though it's going to take time, will open up that ability to be creative. And other than just talking, you could actually create creative opportunities. So you could say, hey, today we're just going to brainstorm. I know everyone's stressed, but we're just going to brainstorm right now. And if you can back up into kind of the creativity by creating a space for it. And just an interesting little strategy you can use if you're wondering, well, how do I help people get de-stressed? And maybe we're not in the most vulnerable kind of mindset right now. Well, if you start innovating and create that space for it, it actually will release some of the stress too. So throw those questions in the chat. Until they come, I'm going to keep asking the panelists some questions because I have a ton. So for leaders that are on the call right now, maybe they're looking to move into a new management role, but they're not sure how. And their current leader right now isn't really being very specific. They just say, you need more executive presence. That's it. And they don't really know how to define it. They don't know how to give the feedback. This is real situations that happen constantly. What advice do you have for these soon to be leaders, or maybe current leaders that are interested in growing right now? And I'm going to turn this over to Shelley first.
it's unfortunate, but I do think sometimes leaders are asked that question and genuinely they don't have the answer. It's difficult sometimes to give that specific feedback. But if you're not getting it, then ask other people. And I'm always amazed how few people will reach directly out to me. And I'm always thrilled when someone does, and I'll take the time. So if you're not getting it from the person that you'd hope to get it from, reach out, to either someone in your organization, go to someone on LinkedIn that you admire. But because people aren't reaching out, you'll be surprised. If you reach out, I promise you, you'll get a good response.
Powerful words, and very true. There are people there that want to help. And Scott, I saw you unmute. Did you have something to add too?
Yeah, I was hoping Carrie could give the definition of this too, because she's got that going on right now with one of our employees. But like, there are folks that work in our team that, there's always like two type of people, but there's three that I've seen in the last several years that I find interesting. Some people are very in tune with what they need to do for their own career to create, platforms to rise in their career as a leader. And part of that is getting multiple, time periods of working on different things. And to many people, that means moving around from company to company. It's not always, not every organization you're working in has the platform for leadership acceleration. But like Shelley was saying, like, if you're not asking, you're not going to get. And so I usually there's 20 to 30% of the people that work for us, that will actually, in those performance evaluations, which we do on an annual basis, we spend a lot of time with each of them. There are people that really want to map out a plan, and what they get very, very serious about it. There's other people that don't. They're just fine with the world moving them along. But for those that want to, you already know what type they are, and that's who wants to lead. If someone's asking for that, that that's a person that is intent and has that DNA. The world cannot live where 100% of the people are leaders, right? You have to have people that are led. And so you have to map that out at some point in the year, whether it's the formal performance evaluation timing, or if there are many companies that do this on a more regular basis. But if you have those folks that are reaching out, you have to attend to that, or they will be the third type, which is, I'm going to go somewhere else if they're not getting that attended to. And I've been surprised a couple of times. I thought, like, there was a gentleman we had here 2 years ago that I really had a plan for him. And I thought he just had the great personality to jump in and learn a lot about sales, and to, within a short period of time, become a leader in sales. But I don't know, for whatever reason, I thought we were attending to it. I had a plan mapped out for him, but I find that there's a lot more jumping around in resumes now than I've ever seen in my history as being an adult worker. I was looking at a CFO on LinkedIn today at a very large food company today, not like General Mills or something that bar, a couple $100 million and that person had never been in a role for more than 2 years, but he had been in like a year to 2 years role at like 10 places. And I'm like, oh my God, like, if that's the way, you get to that leadership position, then I'm confused by it, because it's hard to put your imprimatur on something that you've succeeded in if you're only staying around at a place for a year and a half. So to finalize the thought, is like, you have to attend to those people that are asking for it, because those are the ones that will likely be the leaders.
Oh my God, I would never hire a CFO who has only stayed in a position for a year and a half, 2 years.
I know the owners of the
right?
company. I'm like, oh my God, this is
I
going to be
know,
there
I
for a year
know.
and a half.
Yeah. And I get it. And I think and I'm a Gen Xer. I'm just like all of you. Well, maybe not you, Ben. But, I think that, we have this whole different view, a little bit more of a different viewpoint. And I try to put myself in the shoes of millennials and Gen Zers. And I get it, but I just think that you're spot on. You have to prove that you can be successful in a sustained role, or at least in a company. It's fine if you're moving roles within a company, because I think that proves that you've had success. But this job hopping, I just don't think that it does people any favors, because I think, you're not working through the hard stuff, and you're not establishing that credibility of being able to prove success in that role, especially at the executive level. So to me, that's a huge red flag. And, I think this kind of just leads into my point. Like, I always tell my employees this: you are in charge of your career, nobody else. And and as leaders, just like what you said, Scott, like, we've got to tend to that. But if you're expecting somebody to build your career for you, then you're going to be sorely disappointed. And you're not going to drive it in the direction that you want, or maybe potentially have an opportunity that opens up a door that you were never expecting. And you've got to drive your own career. I used to live in Austin, and a long time ago, I left in 2006. And I was absolutely miserable. I was working for a company that the culture wasn't a fit. I was not successful. It was mostly me, a little bit of the company, but I blamed the company and I blamed, the leadership there for my lack of success. So I was just a paycheck player. And what I realized when I finally said, that's it, I'm leaving, I'm going to move back to Colorado. And I took over I took over operations at Stone Age, and then eventually grew into the CEO role, was that I am in charge of it. And I was sitting there waiting for someone to invest in me. And I'm like, hey, I'm a high potential. I want to be successful, but I wasn't doing the work. And once I figured that out, that is when my career skyrocketed. When I put in the effort, when I said, I'm going to do a good job and I'm going to be a great teammate and I'm going to understand what the company needs and what my team needs, and what my peers need and what my customers need, then that's when my career started to take off. And honestly, that's how I developed executive presence, when I stopped making it about myself and saying, I want to help other people. I want to make my team look good. I want to make my boss look good. I want to really solve customer problems. That's when it all changed for me. But you've got to do the work, and you've got to own your career, and you've got to own the way that you show up. And that's how you grow in your career. If you're waiting for someone else to do it for you, you're going to be waiting forever, and you're going to be disappointed, and you're basically giving away your power. So again, take that ownership, and put that effort into to building relationships, building your skill sets, becoming an influential leader within your company, whether that's as an individual contributor or, in a managerial role.
Mm-hmm. I think you both said something that's really important. And I watch this crisis of self-confidence, especially as people rise in position. And part of that is because people have job hopped. And if you don't cycle yourself and comp your own work and start to understand the trains that are coming and going, and believe it or not, those trains will transfer to other roles at different times. But until you have a few seasons of that and really know it, you won't have that confidence. And as you grow and roll, you get the really hard stuff sometimes. And there isn't always someone there to support you or give you the answers. And the only way that you've had confidence is you've had these experiences that you can draw on. So I think that is so critical for leaders to understand that when you do the hard work earlier on in your career and you stay longer in role, longer in company, and build those cycles, as you progress in not necessarily age, but season of career, it will go faster and your career will start to jump. So that is about taking agency and really showing up for yourself and for everyone else, and saying, like, how do I add value to this organization? And part of that value is learning and contributing in ways that are needed in the moment. So I think that job hopping is really critical. And then I agree that self-ownership, we get this frequently. People are like, I want to grow. And you're like, yeah, I want to help you. And then you get someone that walks into your office like, oh my God, did you know there's a problem going on? I'd like to help solve it. I don't have all the answers, but how can I help? Who are you going to look to? Who are you going to want to grow as your next leader? You want that person who's solving problems for the company and those around them without hope of anything, and obviously that will lead to something, but they're doing it because they're genuinely care. So I think that what you both have said is just so right on, and is really critical and obvious, but still lost on a lot of individuals.
I think the bump in pay that people get from bopping around a lot is like a drug that's hard. I mean, early on in the first 5 or 8 years, if you're able to move every year and a half and you're getting a 20% increase from doing it, you will get over your skis. We hired a digital marketing person that the resume and the interviews were great. Man, it was like she was never at a place more than a year to a year and a half. And it bugged, as the back of my neck, I know this is not going to work out. And like the first month and a half, she was just watching YouTube videos on how to do Klaviyo, which, online stuff. But like, you should have been an expert on that if your resume was honest. But, you know, she got a 25% pay bump at the time. And I think that happens a lot early on because you really, you know, everyone's struggling for pay their bills and to make their life a little bit easier. But if you're in a good position, you're surrounded by good people, you see that the company has got a mission, then stick around for more than a year and a half. It catches up with you because people looking at resumes later on are seeing that you haven't been anywhere very long. So you're not going to get those great, ripe, awesome jobs later because you have this history of only popping in for a year and a half. So just like Carrie was saying, is like, you don't take those resumes seriously. I have a couple of times and I've always regretted it. So the folks that have been there for a year and a half, you know, you're not going to satisfy them, you know, for a 5 to 7 year run.
That was literally my story. I left a job I was totally excelling at. I liked my boss, and there were problems within the company, but you know, every company was there, and I got wooed away for more money, and I could not deliver, and it led me to misery because I was over my skis, just like you said, and they were expecting something more from me that I couldn't give. And it destroyed my self-confidence, and it led to all kinds of issues that, you know, I actually ran away from, to be honest, but luckily I ran to something good and could turn my life around. But it was the worst decision that I made, was leaving a company that was supportive of me, where I was being successful, where I had a boss who believed in me and was investing in me for more money. And, you know, overall, I don't regret it because I'm here where I am now. But I got lucky, but that is exactly what happened to me, is that I overpromised and I underdelivered, and it totally ruined my self-confidence. Yep.
There's something to be said about, you know, if you find a home, instead of looking for a bigger home, to try to, you know, make improvements in your home first. And instead of jumping into another organization because the grass looks a little bit greener, water your grass. And that can benefit you from a confidence perspective. It can help you work cross-functionally and get new skills. It can help you build greater career clarity and impact. But sometimes the home isn't that great to live in. And so you do need to find somewhere that is going to let you develop and grow, and you're going to have, you know, great parents and food on the table and such, instead of just looking for the next shiny object. Because confidence is a key component of job satisfaction. And also, when you're in an organization, you're able to develop really strong relationships that are going to help you in your career moving forwards too. And the more you jump around, the harder it is to create an impact, the harder it is to make an impression. There are instances where you need to, and it benefits you, but there's something to be said about, how do I make today work instead of trying to find a better tomorrow. So rapid fire before we pop off. And thank you very much for your time, everyone. What are your top books, video courses, anything really that you'd say is a resource for you as a leader that has been influential for you? And start us off. We have a few minutes left. Carrie, top resource.
Yeah. First Break All the Rules. It's an old book, but man, it's good. So it's written by the Gallup organization, Marcus Buckingham, and it is absolutely what was the foundation for my leadership. And it's really about, you know, helping people understanding people's strengths, helping people understand their strengths, and then putting them in roles where they can be successful. Not only did it help me as a leader, but it also helped me understand when I wasn't successful in past roles. So it helped me understand myself too. So if there was one book that I would offer anybody who is, you know, even if you haven't read it and you've been in management for a while, that's one. And then the other one that I would suggest is anything by the Arbinger Institute. So they do the Anatomy of Peace and Outward Mindset, and then Leadership and Self-Deception. So it's Leadership and Self-Deception, Anatomy of Peace, and then Outward Mindset. They are phenomenal to get you thinking not so much about yourself, right? It's really easy to tell ourselves stories about the reasons why people do the things they do, and you were usually wrong. And it is a powerful series of books. I make everybody in my company read them because it's really important to be thinking not just about yourself, but having that outward mindset. So those are my two.
Thank you. Shelly, I saw you pop up and grab something.
Yeah, I thought I'd grab it. So the book that I talk about and have for over 20 plus years is The Leadership Pipeline. And this really talks about career passages, and it's very methodical, starts with independent contributor all the way through a CEO and what happens at each career passage from a time, a skill set, work value, and leadership transition. And so if you're looking to make that move, this is helpful to understand what it takes, but it's also helpful to say, is that the work that I really want to do? Because sometimes we take that next level and it's really not the work we wanted. And sometimes it is, right? But this is really good for the how and the why. And if you want to help someone, help yourself, my favorite book.
Love it. Thanks for sharing. And Scott, take us home.
I think one of the things that I do in a more narrow cast way is like, I'm big into Twitter, not in tweeting, but in curating groups of thought leaders and not the big famous ones necessarily, because I like tactical details. But I just got curious about real estate, for instance. And so I've got 10 or 15 people that give a ton of like information about commercial real estate. And so utilize Twitter in that way to create little groups of people that are very open and transparent and talking about things. Like one of the person, I never would have met him, I guess, in my life, although he's in YPO and I'm in YPO. It's a guy named Michael Girdley down in San Antonio. And he's got a fireworks business. He's got a software business. He opened a coffee retail business, and he's prolific in his podcasting on how to look for businesses to buy and businesses to sell. And he's got a couple of people that they do podcasts together. But I think like folks like that are really in the grind on it and aren't necessarily doing the research is another angle to look at, like someone that's really in it. And so if you're ever into like the type of businesses that I'm in, where private equity is really the funding source, there's this really cool book called Venture Deals by two gentlemen. I think they're both in Colorado, Feld and Mendelsohn. And it's very, again, narrow casting, but like if you're ever going to be in this business where you're raising capital, the leadership capability of understanding the basics of what it takes to go raise the money from private equity, because the world of going public it just doesn't exist anymore. It's so small. And so venture capital and private equity capital is what drives everything in business today. So I would just suggest that's an easy book to read where you come out of it almost as an expert in understanding what the world of funding is all about. So maybe not so much in like the leadership side, like Michael Girdley is, but I think you can't be a good leader in today's businesses without having a real good understanding of how things are being financed and what the terms are that the leaders in your company are working with to help get financing into the company.
Just to clarify, was that Venture Deals?
Yes, it is.
Okay,
Yep.
perfect.
Brad Feld and Mendelsohn, I think.
So I want to say thank you to the panelists. You rocked it. I felt your executive presence from my home office here in Austin, Texas. Carrie, even yours, all the way from Colorado. And I want to say thank you also to all our panelists. Thank you for being here, for caring about your growth and development, which also means, based on what everyone shared today, you care about everyone that you lead and everyone that's around you too. So thank you again, everyone. And I hope you have a beautiful evening. Watch your inbox.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.